Hi, everybody. Welcome, Azure Cosmos DB Live TV, episode 33, I think we're on now. Yeah, I know. We started this show in April, just right after Cosmos Conf, I think, and we've run 33 episodes. So,
Congratulations.
Got Jeremy with us. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm nowhere near like Scott. I think he's up to like 700 plus for Azure Fridays, which is, that's years and
I'm
years.
sure it's tens of thousands if you add his other podcasts.
Oh my God.
So,
yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. All the other things he does. So thanks, Jeremy, for joining us. I got Jeremy Likness with us this week from the .NET team. And Jeremy's going to talk about all the cool new stuff that's going on with EF6 and our Cosmos DB provider in there. So welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks. It's great timing. I've been busy the past few days going on campus for the first time in a long time. So it's partially open for the pandemic, and we went to the studio, recorded some sessions, and we've just released Entity Framework Core 6 with a ton of improvements for the Cosmos DB provider.
Now, I remember back earlier this spring, I think you and I had a chat, and you were telling me all the stuff that you guys had committed for EF6. Is all that stuff that we talked about back then, is that all in this release?
I'm pretty sure all the main items we did. In fact, I showed a demo, Planetary Docs demo, and the demo was more complex than I would have liked it to be because of some of the ways that you had to configure Cosmos DB. And I can say it's been greatly simplified because of the changes, and I'll go through those in a second. But because we're kind of a consumer of our own product too, and we want to make sure we understand the trials and tribulations people go through. So my charter as program manager is to provide a good data experience for .NET developers, and a big part of that is making the EF Core provider do what people need it to do when they're working with Cosmos DB.
And it's I got to say, it's super popular. I mean, I've seen your usage numbers compared to like our .NET SDK, and look, man, people love EF Core. I mean, no matter what, they just love it.
I think that's a good point, because it was a bit of an experiment when we started to see how it would be received. Obviously, we were originally an object relational mapper, right. Cosmos DB is not a relational database. And what we found out is there's a lot of feedback about people loving having a consistent API to connect with their data. We also do a lot by convention, so that ability to configure things without having to do a lot of explicit steps is useful. Like we'll implicitly wire up your container and your container name and etc. And we do some things behind the scenes to allow you to store different types in the same container, so discriminators, but things like that. So it's been popular, but there were some features that were pretty important that people said were basically a showstopper for adoption. For example, just being able to do a raw SQL query, right? Yep. So LINQ is a very complex technology. Getting an expression tree and turning it from C# code into something that Cosmos DB understands through the SQL dialect is a non-trivial task. And so sometimes you can't express a query in LINQ. And so being able to throw that directly in as raw SQL, I think is a huge feature that we were able to get in.
I remember seeing that on the issues list. That was a big one that people would bump into. Hey man, this isn't working in LINQ. I need a way to make this work, and that's a great solution for that. Is hey, just go around it.
Yeah, exactly.
Great SQL. So.
Yeah, that's the philosophy with the EF Core, is not all or nothing, right? We're not saying you have to opt in. We want to give you hooks and access to the underlying database, so that if there's things that EF Core doesn't handle, you still have an escape hatch to be able to make that, and it doesn't have to be an all or nothing choice. So
yeah. Well, let's get started on showing us all the goodies you got coming.
Okay, well, I'm going to run through this, and it'll be a lot more interesting when we look at code, but just at a a high level, if you go to our EF page, I have a short link for this, which is a EF Core What's New 6.0, I think it is. Yeah, there we go. And that'll take you to this document. You can navigate on the right side. There's some convenience links here, and you can see I'm on the Cosmos provider enhancements. So one of the biggest pieces that's just configuration, but I think is huge, is defaulting to implicit ownership. So what does that mean? In a relational database, relationships between entities are foreign keys. And you have to explicitly configure what a foreign key means. Does it mean that there's just one of these items? Are there many items? Does one wholly own another item, or are they just related, right? Because they could exist kind of independently and have a relationship, or one may depend on the other. And what you used to have to do with Cosmos DB when you had a complex type with complex nested types is you had to explicitly configure that that parent type owned the subtypes. Yep. Which for very deep object graphs could get a little monotonous and time consuming and a lot of ritual, right, for just storing a document in the database. So what we have now is what's called implicit ownership. We detect when you're using the Cosmos provider, and we implicitly configure that ownership as it should be, right? So we just assume that everything in that class is part of the document unless you opt out. So you can still configure out, and I'll show that, but this is the configuration that was in the EF Core 5 version. So you can see we have owns many, owns many, owns many, and this is straight out of the Cosmos DB Quick Start. Now we're just one line, family, and we tell it what the partition key is, and everything else wires into place and appears the way it should.
Very cool.
The other, what's that?
I said very cool.
Yeah, so the other big thing, which is, I think, a huge improvement, is primitive types. So in a relational database, you need keys, so primitive types don't really have a way to get stored unless you're comma separating them in a single column or something along those lines. In a document database, it makes perfect sense. You just have an array of items that's a property on your document. And so we did not have support for that. In fact, in the past, you used to have to use what's called a value converter. So I had to explicitly say in the planetary docs demo that I'll show you in a minute, we have a list of tags for a document. And you used to have to say, well, take that list, and every time you're saving it, turn it into a comma separated string. And then every time you're loading it, split that string out. So that adds overhead, it adds configuration, et cetera. And what's worse is Cosmos has some great, and I say this word wrong all the time, but array manipulation keywords, right? And you can't take advantage of those if we're stuffing an array into a string. So by explicitly supporting primitive types, this gets serialized the way you would expect. And here we're showing in the database, you actually get the array, and then you can use those Cosmos DB functions over that, and they become a first-class citizen. Going down the list, there are several base class library methods that have corollaries in Cosmos DB, built-in functions like trimming and certain math functions. So we've mapped those. So if in your link you have a type like this, where name length is, name trim to lower, etc., before we weren't able to translate that. Now we can map it directly to the Cosmos DB. So you're not pulling back data and then massaging it. You can have the database actually manipulate the data right there for you. And I'm going to call out at the top of the what's new. I'm sorry, there's another link. Let me, no, it's right here. Second guessing myself. There is, I think, right here in the Entity Framework docs, and this is linked to actually from our Cosmos DB provider section. So we have documentation specific to Cosmos DB and EF Core, which is, if you come in here, this is the main Entity Framework Core documentation. And if you drill down, you'll see that there's database providers down here. And we maintain the Microsoft SQL Server provider, the SQLite, and the Cosmos. So you can go to that Cosmos database provider and find out some information about what's specific and unique about that. But this will also link out to a set of samples that shows different things. And I was going to pull up this sample, which is actually showing the translation of functions. So you can see here we've got, oh, this is the SQL raw. Let me find the other one. That's minimal API, model configuration, new and EF core. So this is what I wanted to show you. So we've got several samples, diagnostics, implicit ownership, etc. But I'm going to be using my Planetary Docs. And Planetary Docs is just an app that I built so that I could show CRUD operations using the EF core provider, because a lot of times the hello world is just a select statement and it's not complex. So this actually has documents. You can view them, you can edit them, there's tags, there's everything else. And what I'll show you here is I've got this search functionality, and this is going and it's searching the title and the content. But we also have authors and tags. So I might have a tag. I just recently added a tag called test. And if we do this test, you can see there's 2 items that satisfy that tag by Scott Addy. So if I put my name in the author filter, we would expect that search to come back empty, which it does. If we put Scott's name, on the other hand, we would expect it to come out with these. And then I can further add the term identity and do that search, and now it's just down to 1. So those searches are happening really quickly. And the reason why is because the way that I set up my database is if I make it over to my emulator, which is going to be one of these, I may have to relaunch it. Let's see. Hello, Cosmos DB emulator. All right, I'm just going to open the Data Explorer here. 1 second.
Yep.
Find that. And open Data Explorer. There we go. There's my emulator. So in the Explorer, I've got this blogs database that is something I demoed as part of .NET Conf, and we'll share those video links in a moment. But I've got audits. Audits are complete snapshots of documents in time. So as you edit the documents, we're automatically saving off every version of that so you can restore them at a point in time. We've got the documents themselves, and I'm just going to open up an example document. So a document's going to contain things like a unique ID. It's going to contain all of this markdown and HTML code. There's a description, and then if we go all the way to the bottom, we can see there's like a published date and there's a list of tags associated with it. So that is what we're searching. But to make the search easier and faster, if you will, I'm also summarizing in these meta containers. And so, for example, here's author Riand is the alias. And you can see I have these summaries of all the documents that that author made. And then I have this tag that has for the tag the list of documents. So basically, when I'm doing a search, if I just search on a tag like test, I'll clear this out. All it has to do is just grab that one item. It's just a single fetch by key, and it already has the document summary. So it's just literally showing this document summary. In fact, we can find that tag test here and see that it has that single, or these 2 sets of entries. I still have the identity filter on. Now, if I want to do a complex search with a tag and text in the document, you can see I'm only saving the title here. This is just the title in the summary, but there's also the markdown and there's also the HTML. And I want to search within that. So I have to somehow search in the document, but also match it to the tag. And I'll have to check with Smit, who is our engineer, who's our query pipeline expert. I could not figure out the right link query to make it translate, but that's fine because our new feature from SQL Raw allows us to actually write something like this. So let me jump into the code and show you some of the query logic here. Let's see. We need to move this over to right here. You saw it and then you didn't. And so I have this document service, and this contains the APIs that I'm using to help me search and edit and update and everything fun like that. So I'm in the search itself. And the search is really easy to implement because if I'm just searching on author alias, which is right here, then I'm just doing a search for that, grabbing the summaries, and I'm pretty much done. I'm just ordering them. Let's say I search by author and tag. Again, that's pretty easy. I can get the results for the tag, and then I can basically use this link query that says, give me the tag entries that also match the author alias and return it to a list. So those are the easy cases. The more complex case is when we're searching over title, description, and markdown. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a SQL query saying select where the title or the description or the markdown contains my search text, and this is parameterized. And then I'm also using the Cosmos keyword array contains to see if that tag is in the list of tags. So this is passing it off to Cosmos. I'm by no means pulling back every entry. What the old version used to do is it would pull back the documents based on the search, the documents based on the tags, and find the intersection, which was not only inefficient, but also expensive, right?
I get a question. Is that, now is Link, or EF behind the scenes sending that as a parameterized query, or is it just basically just sending a straight query?
It's sending it as a parameterized query. In
Okay.
fact, you can see, and this is what I love about iQueryable, how flexible it is to work with. I'm basically saying I'm going to query something. Now, if I'm using the complex case here, then what I'm going to do is build it from this raw SQL, and you can see here I'm passing the parameter. So it is a parameterized query from SQL raw query, and then parameter 1 is the search text, parameter 2 is the tag.
Got it.
If there's an author, I just add an author alias equals, I add one more parameter, and this time I'm doing search text, tag, and author alias.
Got it. Okay.
However, if I'm not doing the complicated query, if I don't have to look for tags, then I can just use straight link, and I'm reusing that same iQueryable. Oh, that is not what I wanted to do. Hold on, let me pull this back. I just hopped screens. So I'm using link because this is a straightforward link expression. It's basically doing the contains that maps. If there's an author alias, then I add that on. And then either way, whether I got it from raw SQL parameterized, or if I got it from just pure link, then I can send it to list async. Now I'm going to add the caveat that this situation here, this array contains, we should eventually be able to translate that, right? So for EF Core 7, I suspect we'll take a look at figuring out the right way to materialize that link and translate it. And it may actually exist and I just haven't figured it out yet, but this is my ability to have an escape hatch if I'm not able to get the actual links in text.
I'm wondering, is there a way, like I always see customers doing this, is they're doing a query for a single document that is where they're actually passing the partition key and the ID as part of the query, which you can do as a point read in Cosmos. I'm wondering, as I'm looking at this, is there a way where you know what the partition key is, but if they're looking for something, if they're passing something and then passing the ID as part of the link query, could you behind the scenes execute that as a point read and do it and get even more efficiency out of it rather than?
And the answer is yes. So there is a item on the list that I haven't integrated into this demo, but we're actually adding intelligence to the query pipeline. Mm-hmm. to detect if partition key is part of that and automatically do a partition query for you, because that's obviously a lot more efficient. But I'm also using, so Entity Framework has the link syntax, but we also have a, let me see if I have it in this service, find. So we also have this find async method. And find async is interesting because it will use the partition key and the ID. So it is the most atomic operation you can do to load something.
So that's,
but it's also,
that's usually, that's probably calling, that's definitely calling, I'm going to say, just looking at that function signature, our read item async behind the scenes, I'm guessing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's doing the single entry, but it's smart enough also to detect if we've already loaded that document. So we basically have tracking built into EF Core, and EF Core tracks everything unless you tell it not to. Sometimes you have just read-only scenarios where it doesn't make sense. But if you're doing a read and update scenario, you want to be able to track those changes and materialize those out. And so find async, if you've already loaded this into this context, it won't reload unless you explicitly ask it to get a refresh copy. So you get some performance benefits from that as well. And let me just show, because I showed getting to the document, you can look at the document, and this is Markdown syntax. I actually, in the browser using Blazor WebAssembly, transform it to HTML Markdown. And of course, if I have HTML, then I can show a preview of what the rendered documentation looks like. And then I have this audit history that you can see I've made modifications from. So let's say we edit this and I completely change the title to say deprecated, no longer valid here, and we'll save that change. And so now if we show the audit history, we can see our title here is deprecated, no longer valid, but we can see in the past it looked like this. I can actually drill into one of those and see it at a point of time. And then I can click here to get back out and return to my current version. Now, one thing I haven't implemented in this example demo, but seems to be logical that could follow on, is the ability to restore a version at a point in time, right?
Yeah, because you're just basically doing an append only to that container, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So let me come back to what's new. You always love seeing the keys, right? So just for anyone who gets nervous when they're reading the docs, every Cosmos emulator has the same key.
You know what I love is that what's new page has got a link to the GitHub issue on it. Was it this page or was it the other one that you showed? Oh, this is so this is the provider overview page. Yeah, that the first one you showed.
Oh, the what's new?
Yeah, the what's new.
Let's navigate this one. What's new? Cosmos provider enhancements. Yeah. Yeah. So we show. So this is actually good because for people watching this, and let me go back and actually do control click so that I don't overwrite this. One of the ways that we do planning, we're in the middle of EF7 planning now, is we look at issues and we also look at upvotes. How much interest is there around this issue? Like this one has 7 upvotes, and we'll actually sort it based on upvotes and use that as a input into our planning process. It's not the only thing, right, that determines it, but it's a bit of it. We do other things like we work with your team and find out new things like, are you adding support for multiple JSON serializers? Okay, well, that makes sense that we should pass that along to the end user. But if anyone's interested in a feature that's not there, search. You can come straight into the issues on EF Core. You can take the area, the label, and we have an area Cosmos. I'll zoom in here so you can see that. So area Cosmos. And there you can see the issues that exist. And if your issue is already there, go in and click that upvote so that we know it's something that there's a demand for. If not, go ahead and enter that. And then other thing I was going to show was, no, I think that's what I wanted to show. So we had primitive types, we had built-in functions, which is huge. So this is a great one here. Look at this. This is a mathematical function where we're basically saying, give me the triangles where rounding angle 1 and angle 2 and hypotenuse and angular math, and all of this gets translated directly to the SQL that Cosmos DB supports with the sin function, the OR, the rounding, etc.
Yeah, that's cool.
So we talked about the raw SQL. Simple queries, this was a huge one, just distinct, right? I want to distinctly pull things from the database. And I'm going to actually swap over to another example to show you one more capability that came out. But the other thing is diagnostic information, so events for inserting, querying, updating, deleting data. So we have execute create an item event. So here it's adding a triangle and saving changes. And here we see execute, and we're seeing the time, and we're seeing the RUs for that. I'm not sure if I had that enabled for planetary docs, but we can certainly look. We can see the issues I had before, but let's see. So Cosmos logging is or logging in EF core is so simple to turn on. Let me show that really quickly. So in my program, I'm configuring my Cosmos provider. And the other thing I want to do is refactor this to use the new minimal APIs, cut down on a ton of the code. So we've got use Cosmos. So here, what I can do is say log2 console write line. This is going to give me way more than I'd ever want. But I'm going to ignore the suggestions for now. Let's go ahead and run that. I've been making a lot of use of my clockwise mouse this week because I had slow to load.
Waiting for stuff to happen.
Yeah, I figure if the indicator's going this way, maybe we can help it along.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just do something simple like start typing my name and grabbing my alias. So that should have resulted in some logging here, although I may not be getting console output into this output. So I maybe, let's see, oh, there we go on the web server. So here we go. So we've got successfully registered URL. We've got framework core, model validation. We've got foreign key property. It's basically going through all of the internals of what it's doing to grab this. And if we go all the way down to the end, let's see. Here we can see, we actually see the SQL.
Yep.
That was produced. So, and notice this, I'm just getting the alias. And so all it's doing is grabbing the alias where the discriminator is author. So it's getting that unique list. And then when we do that complex query, so for example, if I were to search right now, that search is just grabbing that single author right here. So from root C where discriminator is author and the alias is the alias I entered. It's a very simple search. If I now add a tag to it, so let's clear this out. Let's do a tag. I'm going to do Blazor because I'm pretty sure if I search for Blazor in the tag Blazor, I may find something. And we get these documents quickly. If we look down at what was created, we've got right here, from SQL, select where title, description, markdown, and array contains tags. So you can see the exact SQL that's being sent, and you can go and tweak that and do what you want with that. And then I'm assuming somewhere here we're showing the RUs and the time for that as well. So that was,
there you go,
right there, 82 milliseconds, 143 RUs.
Yeah, that's cool.
Let me stop that and let me just show you this one other example. I'm going to close this one out. And I'm going to go to my secret offline folder here. And I'm going to pull up the demo that I showed in .NET Conf called Cosmos Blogger. Oh, I accidentally, say I do this every time. I open it with the wrong version of Visual Studio. I should just uninstall my old copies.
I only have one at a time on my machine.
That's the smart way to go, or have like a sandbox or a different machine.
I just I basically block out an entire day when I need to basically update Visual Studio and all the other stuff, and I kind of use it as a day to kind of clean out all the cruft that all the dev tools and other stuff I've installed, just so I can have a nice clean experience.
Well, speaking of a nice clean experience, this is the server that I used as a blog engine, and this is using Minimal API.
Great concise.
This is actually my my after snapshot, or actually my before, so I'm mocking the blog access. But what I showed is basically I create a Cosmos context. All you have to do is, if you have Entity Framework Core, let me check my dependencies and see. Yeah, so I have the Entity Framework Core package. All you have to do is do services, add DB context factory, and this is going to configure a DB context for you. And then you get some options where you can do like opt, and it's probably not going to autocomplete because, oh yeah, it is. So I would use Cosmos, and then I can pass the keys. And I basically have a class now ready for me to interface with Cosmos DB. And I just literally wired it up to the exact API that I had. So for example, this piece here, let me see if I have a copy of this that is actually an after copy. That has the actual code in it. Because what I wanted to show is like here, the way this database is set up, we can go back to my emulator page. I'm all over the place, but I wanted to show as much stuff as I could. We'll reopen the emulator page. The way that the blogs are stored in this example database is a blog with a set of posts. Now, I probably wouldn't do that in the real world. I might have categories or partitions or topics, but here I wanted to show kind of having multiple blogs with nested posts. Now, of course, if I load this blog, I'm going to get the whole universe with it, which is not necessarily what I want.
Right.
And what's nice about the provider is here, using this code, I'm literally projecting, I'm saying, filter the blogs on ID, and then do this projection of grabbing the blog ID, the description, the image, the link, and the title. This will get passed down as SQL to Cosmos. Cosmos will just return the part of the document I want, and we're good to go.
Yeah.
And then you can even do these correlated subqueries, because what I want to be able to do is pull back posts based on a filter. So I need to construct a blog object that has nested posts, but only the posts that map the filter. So here it's actually using an array to get the sub values of posts and then rebuilding the shape of the data with just the posts that match the filter. So that's something that if people want to watch my What's New in EF Core session that I did with engineering manager Arthur. He was in the UK, but we showed this live at .NET Conf, and it shows you how that projection works and pulls back and gives you exactly what you need. So in that talk, lots of great stuff there, but near the end of that is the demo of this Blogger piece where you can see pulling back and using that correlated SQL.
Yeah, I'll put that. I stuck that AKA MS link up to your talk from, it was yesterday, right? Wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. So it was 2 days ago, actually.
Oh, 2 days ago. Okay.
I did a GraphQL talk the day before the F6 talk. So, and today we're here sharing the goodness of Cosmos DB. So, I mean, besides actually walking through the rest of the post, I just wanted to look at some highlights. So you can configure throughput, which was a huge request. So we're actually starting to open some of the dials that are available. Time to live is huge, being able to auto expire a document. So that's available. And then you also have control over your HTTP client factory, which this becomes huge when you're doing something like using tokens, for example, and you want to have control over the token. And I'll add that caveat because I know that there's now support for Azure Active Directory role-based authentication, which is huge. I know people have been asking for that for a long time. And so that's on the list to look at. Is I added the issue myself is to support that through our provider configuration as well.
I was just going to ask you about that when you mentioned earlier about EF7 planning. And I wondered if that was kind of a big ask from EF users in general, having that AAD.
Let me see. Let's see if anyone's voted it, because you know what? I was going to tweet about it to make people aware that it was out there. So if they wanted to come vote on it, they could. And totally got caught up in .NET Conf and everything else. But it's right here. It's issue number 26491. And we already have one person. I hope this will end up high on the priority list. It's the best security measure, which we agree.
Yep.
And I'm not sure. I wonder if I can't see upvotes because I'm not logged in on this version. I always using that anonymized web client. So.
Well, I'll go add my vote. I'm not sure it counts, but I'll do my part in there.
Every vote counts. We take into consideration everyone's input.
Employees are not eligible.
Well, we have a lot of first-party users. I was actually surprised to hear this use case, which makes sense to me. I didn't realize the team was using it, but they actually have a DB context defined for some data that they're ingesting that they fan out to SQL and Cosmos. And SQL goes into a relational model and sets up certain things. For Cosmos, it's for analytics. And they reuse that same context with the two different providers and use EF Core to easily ingest it and save it out to the different locations. So
I just, it's the RBAC is just, it's awesome. I had Matthias on the other week. He was talking about the new V4 functions triggers that are built. And he was able to set up like a change feed, had functions app using the system identity, and then set up RBAC with that so that it could only work on the containers and do the operations scope just for that Azure function. So, and no login, no nothing, right? It just basically ran within the context, that service principal for the app that had those permissions in the RBAC. And I mean, I think that's cool. I mean, there's no way you can't leak keys or secrets if you're not using them. Right. So,
yeah. Before we had that, the only way that you could go direct to Cosmos DB, which, reasons for and against we could talk about, but in a Blazor WebAssembly app, so direct from the browser, the only way you could safely do that is by going out to a server and asking for a resource token, because that was supported. And then using that resource token, and then someone could still intercept the token, but they'd only have access to what you have access to. This way, the way we were locking down access to get the token was through Active Directory. So now we can just take that Active Directory identity, hand it directly off, and you're off to the races. So, of course, now that Steven Sanderson embedding SQLite in the browser, I mean, Cosmos days are numbered now, right? So that's going to take over. I'm just kidding.
Need Cosmos in a browser? Is that what we need?
Well, you could probably store the documents pretty easily, right, as JSON for a local cache, but that'd be interesting. Do we have any other questions that have popped in?
No questions this episode yet, but if any viewers have any questions, please feel free to ask. I wanted to show your, I put up your session for .NET Conf, and then you also had another short video as well. Was that like an interstitial video?
Yeah, so the session is all of what's new with EF6, which of course is our SQL updates and our relational, non-relational. So I had a little segment. This is focused completely on what's new with Cosmos DB. So it was a pre-record that they premiered during .NET Conf. It's less than 10 minutes. I think it's right at 10 minutes because there's just so much good stuff to show. They wanted it to be 5, but I doubled it. But yeah, so it's a walkthrough of getting started. And I really show the setup from scratch of taking an application, installing the EF Core provider, and starting to query the database, and how straightforward and low overhead it is, because that's really one of the main advantages from using this approach, because the we're not trying to compete with the SDK. It's very capable and has a lot of functionality. In fact, it's always more functionality in the SDK, right, than EF Core provides. What the trade-off you get is things like conventions and a lot of behind-the-scenes mechanics done for you. So I was trying to show that off, basically.
Yeah. It's amazing watching just over the past kind of 3 years, I think, just how the provider has progressed and the support it's getting. And it's great. You guys you're doing it right by responding to what customers are asking for, and doing it right out in the open there. I think it's wonderful. I mean, and the numbers prove it, right? You've got a lot of people using it.
Yeah, I was very happy to see, and my challenge to those watching this, we saw a 50% increase of people using Cosmos DB provider over the past, I think it's since February of this year, which is an encouraging trend. But we also know that was using versions that did not necessarily have all the features that you were asking for, which is like implicit ownership and from SQL Raw. We feel, the team feels, that we have that baseline support now, that mature enterprise applications using Cosmos DB could use the provider if it makes sense. And why does it make sense? It makes sense if you're using a project where that domain fits under the umbrella, and it really makes sense if you're already using EF Core and you have that knowledge and background with it. So it's a familiar API, but we'd love for you to grab EF Core 6, use it, and tell us what's missing, so that EF Core 7 can just close the lid on that story. And I feel like most of the scenarios I can think of, I was in consulting for 20 years, right before I came, well, actually products and consulting, but I feel most of the things I would normally do are addressed, especially with the escape hatch of the raw SQL. But it'll be interesting to see what other features we can provide to help keep that experience great for people working with Cosmos DB and EF Core.
Well, I hope those users that are not using this latest version find their way onto it and start using it, because there's just too much goodness there. There's no reason you shouldn't be using it that I can think of.
I agree.
And again, I'm just, that 50% increase in a little over 6 months is just incredible. I never seen anything like that. So congratulations. It's awesome. And thank you, right? Because those people, they're all using Cosmos. So I'm super excited by that. So, and hopefully they're using our free tier too, and exploring the service and building cool apps using EF6 or Entity Framework, and now at Entity Framework 6 and Cosmos DB free tier. So
yeah, I wanted to add, you actually jogged my memory, one quick thing here, and then if there's no questions, I think I'm done. You can put a fork in me. I'll certainly answer your questions, but we've got this compiled models, which is really only comes up if you startup time's a concern, or you have a very large and complex model. And I don't know how large and complex the models are for people making, I'd call it extreme or edge use of Cosmos. But what we found is that we sort of discover the relationships and how the domain maps to the backend database as part of that configuration, and that was taking some time. And so with compiled models, we actually generate the code that materializes that set of relationships. And so it increases the startup time significantly. We had some models that where they might take 10 seconds to start could start up in sub-second, with these changes. And the reason why I brought it up is because I know a lot of people like using Cosmos DB with Azure Functions, and this just makes that combination of EF Core, Cosmos, and Azure Functions a lot more viable. In fact, one of the tasks on my list is to look specifically at the Azure Functions experience with EF Core and make sure we've got a very first-class experience with that. And I'm hoping things like this are improvements that people get for free just by plugging into the latest version as well. So
explain to me what's going on behind the scenes with these compiled models. Can you tell me what is it actually doing?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's going to probably pertain a lot more to relational models than Cosmos, but there will be things like conventions. Like, let's say you have data attributes that say this is a decimal precision 18.2 if that's supported. Let's say you have certain relationships that you're expressing, or ownership, or I'm trying to think, there's a lot more. For example, conversions, where you're saying basically this isn't materialized as is in the database, so I have to run a converter before and after. All of those things are fluently configured. And so what happens is you run code, EF Core looks at that fluent configuration and builds up an in-memory model of what that mapping looks like, so that then it knows how to generate the right SQL dialect when you issue a link statement, or you load and you update and you do all of these things. So what the compiled model does is it makes that introspection at compile time and generates a static snapshot of those relationships. So there's no inspection, there's no building up in memory. It's a set of classes that load instantaneously and wholly represent that set of relationships between the properties. So it increases dramatically just startup time. This is only a hit that happens up front. So if you have an app that's on a server that just restarts every once in a while and you can take a little bit of a hit, it's not going to be much of an improvement. But if you have an Azure function that has to wake up quickly and respond, or you're in a microservices environment where you have multiple backend microservices that you're spinning up, those are all situations where you can take advantage of this.
Is it warming up the connection? Like in like our SDK, if you call like a get container or get database, in the SDK or in the code, you're actually only getting a proxy to the resource. You actually haven't connected to it in any meaningful way. So when you do like a get container and get a reference to it, you're still going to have a long startup when you run your first operation against it, because it actually hasn't connected to the service yet. There's no connection there yet.
Right.
So,
yeah. So this doesn't solve that connection. It just solves the materialization of the internal structure. So if you like execute a link query from blogs where this is this and project that, it has to say, okay, I know blog is mapped to this container in this database, and make all those connections. So this will improve that, but it's still at the end of the day, once you materialize the result of the query, that's when it sends that over the wire, and then it's still going to be subject to whatever handshaking and startup is involved there.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, cool. Well, Jeremy, this was cool, man. Let's do it every cycle.
Sure.
I do a roundup on Ignite. I did that last week when we had our Ignite, and I invited a bunch of PMs on, and they talked about all the stuff they just released. I think we should have a regular roundup on Entity Framework and just talk about all the stuff you guys are doing. I'm guessing your release cadence is twice a year, right? Just like everybody else, kind of.
Yeah, we release with .NET. So when .NET 7 comes out, yes.
Okay.
But I mean, what's important for people to understand is we put our nightly builds under the same rigor as we do a release. A release is basically just the end nightly build. And so while it's not a production license or all the nuances there, as far as understanding new features, preparing and building, and even using the nightly builds. Those are there. They run through the same suite of tests. So we put out features as frequently as we can. And so for people who don't want to wait till the first preview comes out, or don't want to wait till the next .NET Conf, right, which is usually when we release the next .NET, they can take advantage of those nightly builds and start to use it right away and help influence the shape of what the final product looks like.
Well, that's cool. And they can get up onto, where did I have? Well, it's over in that GitHub repo that you were showing earlier, right?
What's that?
Where they can get the releases, the interim releases?
Yes, in fact, so let me just do this. If you go to issues, there's a pinned issue on the top, and this is biweekly status updates. Those status updates come out biweekly, so every other week, right? And what they'll include, like, here's the most recent one here, and you can see, so November 4th, you have core general availability, learn more, comment on GitHub. It's showing like links out to the features, but there should be a link here, consider using the daily builds. So we have this in pretty much every announcement. And when you click on the daily builds, it walks you through exactly what to do in order to take advantage of those. So there's a whole page, and even a PM can write code from these instructions. So I can make the nightly builds run on my machine following these. They're pretty straightforward.
So simple, even a PM can do it. Well, that's cool. Well, I hope people take advantage of that and can exercise and then file bugs on your issue list and say, hey, this is not working, or it is working. And yeah, great. Well, tell you what, we're going to do this again. I like having you on, and I love talking about all the great improvements, new features, and all that other stuff that's coming down the pipe with Entity Framework 6.
Sounds awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And for those out there listening, reach out to the team. Let us know what we can do. We're very excited to bring you this provider.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jeremy. And thanks everyone for watching this week. We're going to take a little break for the next 4 or 5 weeks. Unfortunately, with vacations and holidays and my travel coming up, not able to get any shows put together. But we will be back December 16th. I'm going to have Justine Kochi from our team. She's a new PM on our team, and she's going to talk about the new Logic Apps connector for Cosmos DB. So come and join us for that. That'll be a lot of fun. And until then, if you want to watch any of the other episodes, just go to AKAMS Cosmos DB Live TV, and you can catch this episode and any of the other 32 other episodes that we've had since we launched this show. So that's it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Jeremy. It was great having you on.
Thanks.
Okay, bye, everyone.